Welcome to the Arabesque Scissors YouTube channel. I'm Ali Phillips and today I'm going to take you through how to make all the pockets and the sweet little flaps for the Smart Sofa Station. You can find the link for the pattern in the description below, and if you like sewing organisational videos, please consider liking this video and subscribing. And if you have comments for other organisational patterns you'd like me to design, leave me a comment. Now to get started, you need to print and cut out all of the template pieces from your pattern. And also print out the handy little label names that will help you keep track of all the little pieces. So place the template onto the fabric and trace around the edges, and you can stack your fabrics if you would like to save time. Then I like to cut them out using a combination of my rotary cutter and my scissors. Then repeat this until you have all the template pieces cut out for both the interfacings and the fusible fleece. And then you can stack all the fronts and backs and all the interfacings together and clip their little label names on them so that you don't lose anything and you can keep everything nicely organised. So now we're ready to fuse the interfacing and the fleece. So take a flap and place it wrong side up, and then place the woven interfacing with the glue side down into the middle and fuse it into place. Now flip it over and press it again on the right side. Now take your medium weight interfacing and place it with the glue side down on the top of the first one. But don't fuse it from this side, as your iron will stick to it. So flip it over again and fuse it from the right side, but make sure you also keep your iron moving, otherwise you can end up overheating it and it will warp out of shape. So just give it a double check that everything's nice and firmly fused together, and then you can keep repeating this process by fusing the lightweight interfacing onto the back first, followed by the medium weight interfacing until all of your flaps and pockets are done. So now I'm fusing the fusible fleece onto the wrong side of pocket D. So now we're going to baste the fronts and the backs of the large pockets together. So place them wrong sides together and clip around the edges. Just spreading out your binding clips as you go so that you can secure all the edges into place. Then you can take to the sewing machine and baste all around the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now take a front and back flap and place them right sides together. Clip around the edges until you have all of them put together. These are all ready to take to the sewing machine and sew together. So for pocket E, we need to leave 1.5 inch opening on the top edge so that we can turn this through to the right side. So make sure you backstitch at the beginning and end. And repeat this for flap E, making sure that you backstitch securely so that you can turn it through. Now we can take everything to the machine and stitch them together. So now we're at the sewing machine and we need to stitch everything together right along the edge of that interfacing at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, making sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Now your stiletto tool really is your best friend here. It's just fantastic for sewing really small fiddly things together as it helps keep all of your layers together, and it's just like a third finger that you can put right in close to the needle and you don't damage your finger. So just take this really slowly and carefully and you'll have no problems. So now we need to trim all the seam allowances down to 1/8 of an inch. And then turn all of the flaps and the pockets right sides out. So you just want to push your fingers right inside of that and roll the seams between your fingers just to bring all the seams right up to the edge and make sure nothing's folded in. And I like to use my scissors as a helper to push all of this out and even to shape those curves so that you can get a really nice crisp edge and shape. So when you're happy with the shape that you've got, just give it a really good press with the iron and you'll get a really nice crisp result. And I'm really happy with that. It's a really nice shape and it's a really good result. So now I've got flap E here and I'm just going to trim the corners off it. So just trim really close to your stitching, but make sure that you're not actually cutting through your stitching. And then now I'm going to trim the seams down, but along the top where the opening is, I'm actually going to leave that at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so it makes it much easier to tuck that in when it's time to turn it through and tuck all the edges in. So we're going to turn this little piece through to the right side, so just do it really gently and carefully, and you can use a point just to coax those corners through to be nice and pointy. So if you're careful, you can stick your scissors into that point and just very gently poke it out so that it's nice and a nice pointy point. And you can just roll the seams with your fingers between your fingers so that you can just get that nice crisp edge right on the edge. And then just give it a really thorough press again, just being careful not to press those open edges just yet. So now we're going to push those raw edges back inside and just manipulate them until you've got them nice and straight. You can give them a press as you go if you like, until you've got a nice straight edge that you're really happy with. And a little trick I like to use is just doing some glue basting here. So I've got a little applicator here, and you just run a really small bead of glue along inside the open seam allowance there, and then just press those edges together. So just hold down one side and run a tiny amount of glue along the seam and press it all back together. And then we're going to top stitch along the top of pocket E and around the outer edge of flap E. Now, top stitching these little flaps can be really fiddly, so just keep your trusty stiletto in your hand and go really slowly, and that will just help you keep these small pieces under control and help you keep your stitching really straight. So I've switched feet now to my open toe foot, and this just gives me a much better view of what I'm actually stitching. And as my pieces get smaller and smaller, I'm just taking this slower and slower. I'm stopping and lifting my needle a lot and lifting my foot, and I'm just taking it slowly, and this will help you get a really good result. So getting started making this felt needle keeper, you need to be aware of the limitations and your options when you're working with woolen felt. So for the way we're going to use this, we do need to press this, but you need to be aware that felt will shrink the first time that you actually press it. Again, if you just watch, you can see it actually warping and sort of moving a bit out of shape here. So if we did this after we had cut it to size, it would be too small for what we needed. So pre-press your felt. And then you'll have no problem being able to press it again afterwards, and you'll see that it doesn't actually change its shape. Okay, so I've got my felt cut down to size here, and we're just going to go ahead and mark up the measurements that the pattern calls for. Okay, so you've got 4 lines marked there. You're going to need to fold the first pair of lines so that the ends meet at the top and at the bottom. Just check that you can see both of them aligning on the top and the bottom. Then we're going to take that to the machine and stitch down there on that line, which will also stitch on that line along there. So now I have my felt needle keeper nicely stitched down, and I've pressed these pleats flat as well. I'm going to go ahead and mark a centre line along here. I'm actually using a friction pen because I don't have an air erasing pen, and if I used my water soluble pen I would have to wet my felt, and I don't want to do that. But if you have an air erasing pen and you're not comfortable using a friction pen, you use whatever you're comfortable with. So just mark a centre line down the centre of both, and then I'm going to stitch with my perlate thread. I happen to have this Anchor brand in colour number 27, which is lovely raspberry pink colour, and matches really well with what I've got. So just do some big stitch quilting. I like to start exactly in that seam on the back there and try and come up exactly on the line that I've ruled. And you can just make your stitches as big or small as you would like. Okay, and go ahead and repeat for the narrower section here. There we have a cute little needle keeper section all finished. Just need to add our edge sections on top and bottom. So you're just going to place one of them at the top and the bottom, right sides together. And stitch that down. Now I've attached the edges, and I've also top stitched along each edge, and you can see I've pressed the felt underneath that edge there so that it just sort of deals with the bulk a little bit there. Now you need to mark the midpoint on your needle keeper section on the top and the bottom of both of these edges. And now we're ready to place this onto the base. Now the pattern calls for measuring 10 inches up from the end of base A, which will put your needle keeper about here. But bear in mind that you want this to fit your particular sofa or armchair, so if this isn't quite in the right position for you, take this to your sofa and measure where you want this to sit. So just for these purposes, I am going to show you what the pattern says. This fits my IKEA armchair very well. So just measure your midpoint right across the top here at the 10-inch mark. So also, depending on whether you're right or left-handed, you might want this to be on this side, or you might want it to be on this side. So just think about that as well before you place this. I'm going to put mine facing this way, so you're just going to match up these midpoints here. And I like to clip. Clip where I can. So I'm also aligning my midpoints here, and seeing I can't clip in the middle here, I'm just going to put a couple of pins in. Trying to keep all this as straight and square as I can, because the felt is a little bit warpy. So okay, so I've got some clips, I've got a couple of pins, and then we just take this to the sewing machine and stitch around all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now we need to baste flap B in place, and my preferred method of doing that is to glue baste it, just because it's quite small, and it's quite easy for it to just get a bit skewy. So just do a narrow bead of glue along there and centre that. Give that a press too, that just helps dry the glue. And then you're going to baste that. Now it's time to add the little section of single fold bias binding. So I've cut that to the right length. You just need to remove your steamer seam tape from the back. And then press that into place. Just make sure you're covering your raw edges there, and then give that a good press. And now we're going to top stitch that at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So my tip here is to pull up your bobbin threads to the top when you're starting off, so that you can keep the back of your work beautiful and neat. And as you get back around to the other side, just repeat that, and then you can tie those threads off and bury them in the top. And this is just a really lovely way to finish everything off. Okay, so now we're ready to cover up the remaining raw edges that we have on our base with our strips of single fold bias. So I like to use a ruler here as a straight edge. I've removed the steamer seam from the back of my tape here, and I'm just going to put this over the raw edge here, covering up all the stitching lines that are underneath here, getting it as close as I can to this little flap B, and using my ruler as a straight edge to check that I'm getting everything nice and parallel. And then just take your iron and keeping your ruler in place for the first part, just fuse along there. And when you're happy that it's fused a little bit, you can move the ruler out of the way and do a really good job. Okay, then just like to flip everything around. So using your ruler as a straight edge to align everything. Just going to put the bias down, getting it as close as we can to flap B while still covering up that stitching. Everything nice and parallel here with the pocket A, and then just fuse into place. And look at those beautiful straight edges, a thing of beauty. And now we'll just take this to the machine and stitch along these edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I like to start on the edge that's closest to the little flap, and as you come up to it, just gently move it out of the way so that you're not going to catch it in your stitches. And when you get back to the other side, the other edge is much easier. So just repeat that, just really carefully making sure you're not catching your flap in the stitches. So now you can go ahead and clip flap C onto the edge of the base, and then you're going to go ahead and stitch this down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And when you're done, flap C will fit underneath flap B for a really sweet needle keeper to keep your needles all nicely stored. So now we're going to place pocket D onto the other end of the base and clip all the way around the edges, and then we're going to take this to the machine and baste both of these clipped edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we're going to mark the channel sections in pocket D here. And the idea of this is that this little top straight section here can hold a little pair of scissors. And so we need to mark a little channel here going from this top point on pocket D here all the way down. Now the pattern shows the stitching line going through the edge of the little pocket E here, but depending on how wide all of yours turned out, you may or may not be able to do this. So for this particular version that I'm making here, if I go from this point here and mark down, it's actually going to go pretty much along the side edge in the channel alongside the little pocket here, so that's perfectly fine to get the stitching line straight. And if you would like to add in more sections here, you can just put whatever tool you'd like to slip in here. You can just test out a little pen and work out where you would like it to be, and you can stitch in as many extra channels as you would like. So pull your threads up to the top if you would like to hide your bobbin threads, and you can stitch from the top down to the bottom as I'm doing here, or go from the bottom up to the top. It's totally up to you.